AITA for refusing to give my wife half of everything after she tried to cheat? Hi, I'm a 35-year-old man, and I was married to Jane, 32, for 7 years before it all went south. Our relationship dynamic was pretty standard on paper. I built my construction company from practically nothing into a successful business with projects across the state. I started solo, with a used F-150 and enough tools to fill half a garage. The first few years were brutal. 80-hour work weeks, sleeping in the truck sometimes to save on gas, eating whatever I could while bidding on jobs that barely covered materials. I'm not trying to brag, but I sacrificed everything to make this work. I missed my best friend's wedding because we were finishing a commercial project that kept us afloat that year. I worked even with pneumonia because I couldn't afford to lose a client. I reinvested every single penny of profit into better equipment and hiring skilled people. Meanwhile, Jane didn't work a single day during our marriage. Not one. That was our agreement. You focus on your dreams, honey, and I'll take care of the house. Seemed fair at the time, but taking care of the house actually translated to hiring a cleaning service with my money, ordering takeout 4 nights a week, and occasionally hosting networking dinners, which somehow always ended up being just her friends. The most effort she put into our home was redecorating the living room 3 times in 7 years because she got bored with the style. I wanted her to live her best life, so I made sure she had everything: a new Audi, a personal trainer, a shopping habit that would make your credit card melt. Meanwhile, I wore the same 5 t-shirts in rotation and drove a car with 100,000 miles because I'm practical. She never worried about money, and I never complained because I figured that's what you do when you love someone. Our house was nice, not mansion level, but definitely in an upper-middle-class suburban area, good schools and all that. We had a dog, but no kids. From the outside, we were that couple people probably envied. Successful, seemingly happy, with all the trappings of a good life. Jane was that girl who always turned heads, charismatic as hell. She could walk into any room and, within 5 minutes, have everyone eating out of the palm of her hand. But I wasn't jealous. I trusted her completely. I worked late most nights. The company was growing fast and managing multiple construction sites while juggling clients, contractors, and city permits isn't a walk in the park. One night, I was at the office around 10 p.m., finishing up some project proposals, when my phone buzzed with a text from Brian, a friend who manages a restaurant downtown. Hey, is Jane out of town? Because I swear I just saw her at the Orchid with some dude. The Orchid, obviously not the real name, is a fancy restaurant where you drop a minimum of $300 on dinner. My stomach dropped. Jane had told me she was staying home that night because she wasn't feeling well. I texted Brian back. Are you sure it was her? I was literally 2 tables away from her, and they didn't look like just friends, if you know what I mean. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, maybe a cousin or an old friend visiting from out of town. But the next morning, when I casually asked her what she did the night before, Jane blatantly lied to my face. Oh, nothing, just watched some Netflix and went to bed early, still feeling a bit under the weather. That's when I knew something was off. Look, I'm not the type of guy who checks his wife's phone or tracks her location. I always thought that kind of stuff was unnecessary and toxic, but now I had a reason to be suspicious. That night, after she fell asleep, I checked our shared bank account. At first, everything looked normal, until I saw a $2,800 charge to Diorki from 2 days ago. My heart started racing. $2,800, that's 3 months of car payments. Jane didn't have her own credit card. We shared one account for everything. So where the hell did this charge come from? I investigated further the next day. I grabbed the mail before Jane could see it and found a credit card statement in her name from a bank I'd never heard of. The balance, over $15,000 spent in just 6 months. $15,000. That's a down payment on a house or a really nice home theater system. She'd opened a secret credit card and was spending like crazy. But she wasn't just treating herself. The charges were for hotels, restaurants, and expensive gifts. She was spending on someone else, probably buying this dude gifts with the money I worked my butt off to earn. So I went even further and checked her call history. Not my proudest moment, but when your wife lies to your face, all bets are off. There was one number that kept popping up, always late at night or at random times during the day. Jane deleted the calls from her history, rookie mistake, but they still showed up on the phone bill. I called the number when I knew she wasn't around, and it went straight to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Matt. Leave a message. Matt. Who the hell was Matt? For a moment, I almost left a message saying, Hey, Matt, it's the guy whose wife you're sleeping with. But I decided to play it smart. A quick social media search, and I found him. Matt Stevens, corporate lawyer at one of the big downtown firms. Good looking, I'll admit. His connection to Jane wasn't obvious on social media. They weren't even Facebook friends. But once I knew what to look for, I found a few comments exchanged that were a little too friendly. I could have confronted her then, but I wanted irrefutable proof, something that couldn't be talked away. Security 101. So I installed a camera system in the common areas of our house. Living room, kitchen, and main entryway. Perfectly legal, since the house was also mine. Nothing in the bedroom or bathroom, because I'm not a complete creep. I didn't tell Jane about the new security installation, just did it while she was at her yoga class, and then casually mentioned that we got a good security package through the company. I also backed up her phone that night while she was showering. Again, not my finest hour, but I needed to know what I was dealing with. And what I found wasn't just infidelity. It was calculated betrayal that made me realize I never really knew the woman I married. So, with the cameras installed, I basically became a detective in my own home. Not exactly how I planned to spend my weekends, but it was a lot cheaper than handing over half my construction company, my house, and my money to a cheating, manipulative wife. It didn't take long for the cameras to catch everything. Within the first week, Jane brought Matt over to our house while I was working late. The absolute audacity of this woman. She brought her lover into the house I paid for, sat him on the couch I bought, and served him drinks from the bar I stocked. But here's where things get really messed up. They weren't just having an affair, they were actively planning how to destroy me. The cameras caught their entire conversation, crystal clear audio. Once we file the papers, we need to ask for at least half the business, Jane said. Wilson Construction is worth a fortune. Matt, who I now realized wasn't just some random corporate lawyer, but a divorce lawyer, was advising her on exactly what to say and do. Just keep a log of every time he misses dinner or skips out on something because of work, Matt told her. We're building a case that he was emotionally absent. And make sure you are the one handling all the social events and house stuff. We need to show that you contributed to his success. They were literally strategizing how to take everything I had. Jane wasn't just cheating on me. She was meticulously plotting to destroy me financially with her lawyer boyfriend. It was like watching a bad movie, except it was my actual life. I kept watching the recordings and gathering evidence for a few more days. Jane would tell me she was going to yoga or meeting friends, and then I'd check the security cameras and see her getting all dolled up to go out on her dates. Sometimes, she would come home and sleep in our bed like nothing happened. The coldness with which she did it made me sick to my stomach. At this point, I decided I needed to step up my investigation. I sat in my car, trying to look inconspicuous, hunched over with a baseball cap and sunglasses, like the world's most obvious spy, outside the restaurants where I knew they'd be. Ridiculous, yes. Effective, absolutely. Within another week, I had everything I needed. Photos, taken by yours truly, of Jane and Matt entering hotels together. Thank you. Zoom lens I panic bought on Amazon. Videos of them dining out and holding hands like they were a legitimate couple. Screenshots from their social media where this Matt was bragging about buying her gifts, like a $5,000 bracelet. And designer handbags. The most frustrating part, it looked like this had been going on for almost a year. A year. While I was busting my ass expanding my business into 2 new counties, my wife was busy test driving her replacement husband. But wait, there's more. One night, I remotely accessed the security cameras while I was at a job site and saw Jane going through my office. She was taking pictures of my business documents, contracts, client lists, everything. She even found where I kept my passwords and took pictures of those, too. When I confronted her later, calmly, all casual-like, I asked, "Hey, were you looking for something in my office?" She gave me some lame excuse about looking for insurance papers. I just nodded and pretended to buy it. I knew I had to protect myself, fast. So I called Chris, my friend, who luckily is one of the top divorce lawyers in the city. Not a bottom feeder like Matt, but the kind of lawyer who makes other lawyers nervous. I told him everything. The infidelity, the conspiracy, the evidence I'd gathered. Well, looks like Jane messed with the wrong guy, Chris said after watching some of the videos. But before we go to war, Tell me, do you have a prenup? After my initial meeting with Chris, when I learned exactly what Jane was planning, I called my dad. My old man isn't the "I told you so" type, but, man, he'd earned it this time. Well, I said after explaining everything. Looks like that prenup you made me sign is about to save my backside. There was a long pause on the line. I could almost hear him trying not to say what he was thinking. Dad, just say it. You were right. He chuckled, but it wasn't a happy chuckle. He said, never in my life have I wanted to be wrong about something so badly. That hit me hard. He wasn't celebrating being right. He was sad that his son was going through this. And then he completely switched into dad mode, telling me how he'd gone through something similar with his business partner years ago, not with my mom, obviously. They're still disgustingly in love after 45 years. People who try to take what you built instead of building their own are always out there, he said. You just never expect it to be someone you sleep next to every night. That's when it hit me. We did have a prenup. Before we got married, my dad, who'd been through a nasty divorce himself, insisted that Jane sign one. At the time, my business was just taking off, so she signed it without much resistance. The agreement was clear. What I brought into the marriage and what I built with my company would remain mine in the event of a divorce. When I first brought up the prenup, Jane acted like it was no big deal. We were sitting at a little cafe downtown, and I was nervous as hell to bring it up. But she just shrugged and said, sure, whatever. It's just a piece of paper, right? Then, immediately, she started showing me pictures of wedding venues. Back then, my company was just me and two other guys, a beat-up truck, and some tools. I think she signed it thinking she was just humoring my dad's paranoia. The look on her face when she reviewed the documents, like she was doing me a huge favor, priceless in hindsight. I'd almost forgotten about it because I never thought I'd need it. Jane, apparently, had also forgotten about it. Or, more likely, Matt convinced her they could get around it. Chris reviewed the agreement and confirmed it was ironclad. This is good, but we need to be careful. If she can prove you were emotionally abusive or abandoned the marriage, a judge could invalidate it. That's when we came up with a plan. I would continue playing dumb. I wouldn't confront Jane yet. I'd let her think her plan was working while Chris and I prepared our counteroffensive. For the next few weeks, I was the model husband on the surface. I'd come home with flowers every now and then, suggest date nights, which she'd often decline because she was tired or not feeling well. I made sure to have witnesses to my attempts to save our marriage. Meanwhile, I moved my important business documents to a secure location, changed all my passwords, opened a separate bank account that she didn't know about, and started transferring some assets there, all perfectly legal, according to my lawyer, as long as I declared them in the divorce. I documented every time she lied about her whereabouts, every time she said she was going to yoga or with friends when she was actually with Matt. I logged every large withdrawal from our joint account. The whole time, Jane had no clue I knew what she was doing. She thought I was a clueless husband who worked too much to notice her affair. She thought I was easy prey. Well, she was wrong. Then, one day, after a month of gathering evidence and securing my assets, the cherry on top happened. She left her email open on our computer, and there it was, an email to Matt. Subject, divorce strategy. I took screenshots of everything before she realized. The email detailed their entire plan. She was going to wait until my company finished a big project that would bring in a huge profit, and right after that, she'd file for divorce. She'd demand half of everything. My company, my properties, my investments. She even mentioned they planned to move to another state once they got their share of my money. That was the final nail in the coffin. I had everything I needed. Now it was time to meet with Chris and finalize our counterattack strategy. Jane thought she was so clever, but she had no idea what was coming. Before I tell you what happened next, some of you might be wondering, how could Jane forget about the prenup? Well, that's actually the most interesting part of this whole mess. It's not that she forgot exactly. She just thought it didn't matter. After going through her emails more thoroughly, I found exchanges between her and Matt where they discussed it. Matt had been feeding her legal garbage, telling her things like, prenups get overturned all the time, and we'll argue that you signed it under duress. That was their real plan. They were going to claim that Jane didn't understand what she was signing, that she was coerced, that it was unfair, and that it should be invalidated. Jane bought it hook, line, and sinker. She had so much faith in Matt's supposed legal expertise that she didn't even bother to review the prenup herself. She thought she was one step ahead of me, but she had no idea she was about to get schooled. Back to the story. I spent about 6 weeks gathering evidence and getting everything prepared with Chris. We had it all: video recordings, text messages, emails, bank statements, credit card bills, a mountain of evidence that proved both the infidelity and the conspiracy to defraud me in the divorce. And then, finally, it happened. One afternoon, I came home from work, and Jane was waiting for me with this weird smile on her face. "We need to talk," she said, sliding an envelope across the kitchen counter. Inside were the divorce papers. I opened it up, feigning surprise, skimming the documents while she watched my reaction. The demands were exactly what I expected: half of my company, lifetime alimony, our house, even my truck. A complete financial gutting. "I'm not happy anymore," she said, like she'd rehearsed it. "I think we both know this isn't working." I nodded slowly, playing my part perfectly. "Can I ask why?" "There's someone else." Didn't even flinch, didn't even bat an eye. "I just feel like we've grown in different directions. You're always working, and I need more in a relationship." I was dying to throw all the evidence in her face right then and there, but I stuck to the plan. I just nodded again. I told her I needed some time to process it and went to call my parents for support. Actually, I called Chris. It was go time. The next few weeks were surreal. We were still living in the same house, but we barely spoke. Jane started staying out late most nights, not even bothering to lie about where she was. I'd see her smirking while looking at her phone, probably texting with Matt about how well their plan was going. Meanwhile, I was actually working harder than ever, closing a big commercial project. I knew she was waiting for that money to come in so she could claim her share. One night, she even made a comment, like, "It's good you're focusing on work right now. Finish what you need to finish." The subtext was clear: finish the project so I can take half the money. Chris and I filed our response to her divorce petition. It looked like we were agreeing to most of the terms, but we requested time to properly value the company. This bought us the time we needed to finish our strategy. Basically, we let her think she had won, while we set the perfect trap. The trial date was set for 3 months after she filed. During that time, I made some strategic moves with the money, always documenting everything legally. I closed the big project and collected the payment, but I immediately reinvested most of it back into the company, with totally legitimate expenses that we'd planned for months. Jane noticed that the business account didn't have as much money as she'd expected, and one night she confronted me. "Where's the money from the West Side project?" "Had to buy new equipment," I replied casually. "Business expenses." Her face twisted in anger, but she couldn't say anything without revealing that she'd been monitoring my accounts with the divorce in mind. As the trial date approached, Jane became more and more confident. She started moving some of her stuff out of the house, looking for a new place to live, even talking about her half of the things in the house. She was so sure she'd be rich in a few weeks that she was already spending money she didn't have yet. The night before the trial, I could barely sleep. Not because I was nervous, but because I was impatient. I wanted to see her face when it all came crashing down. The morning of the trial, Jane spent 2 hours getting ready. Hair, makeup, clothes. She dressed to impress, in clothes I paid for. Bless her heart. She had no idea she was getting ready for her last happy day. We drove separately. When I arrived at the courthouse, I saw her outside with Matt, all lovey-dovey like a team. But the second he saw me, Matt quickly walked away. Coward. Didn't even have the guts to face me. Inside the courtroom, Jane sat on one side with Matt, looking smug. I sat on the other side with Chris, calm and ready. Jane kept glancing at me with a little smirk, probably thinking I was about to lose everything. The judge, an older woman with silver hair and an implacable expression, called the court to order. Matt went first. He stood up with a dramatic flair, like he was on a TV show. "Your Honor, my client has been left financially destitute due to the selfish actions of Mr. Wilson. She dedicated years of her life to supporting this business, only to be discarded when it became successful. I had to bite my tongue so hard I probably drew blood. Jane supporting the business? Please. She'd never set foot on a construction site. She didn't know the name of a single one of my employees. But in court, Matt was painting her as a dedicated partner who sacrificed everything for my success. Hilarious. Jane gave up career opportunities, provided emotional support, maintained the home so that Mr. Wilson could focus on his work. The judge listened intently, taking notes occasionally. Then, Matt got to the numbers. As compensation for her contributions to the marriage, my client requests half of Wilson Construction, valued at approximately $4.2 million. In addition, the marital residence, valued at $850,000, monthly alimony payments of $112,000, and various other assets, including investment accounts. Jane was beaming, looking at the judge expectantly. The whole package would have left me broke, utterly destroyed, obliterated everything I'd worked for. Matt finished his speech with a triumphant grin, like he'd just proven the existence of gravity or something. Your Honor, my client only wants what is fair after 7 years of marriage. The judge turned to Chris. Counsel for the defendant, your statement? It was time. Jane had no idea what was coming. The courtroom was dead silent as Chris stood up. Jane was still wearing her confident smirk, blindly and mentally spending my money. Matt, next to her, looked like a shark in an expensive suit. Chris opened his briefcase and started calmly leafing through it. Then, in the calmest, most professional voice, he informed the judge that there was some key information that Matt had omitted in his presentation. The judge nodded, indicating for him to continue. And that's when Chris pulled out our prenuptial agreement. He placed it in front of the judge, who began to review it. Jane went from smug to confused in 2 seconds flat. I could see Matt frantically whispering to her. But Chris wasn't done. He mentioned that we had evidence, not only of infidelity, but of conspiracy to commit fraud. The judge looked interested. Jane went pale. That's when Chris pulled out the flash drive with all of our evidence. The judge allowed the evidence to be presented. The court clerk turned on the monitor display. Jane went from confused to panicked. She was shaking her head repeatedly and tried to object. That's private. She exclaimed. The judge immediately shut her down. And then, the video started to play. First, Jane and Matt in our living room, discussing how to take half of my company. Then, Jane taking pictures of my confidential business documents. After that, clips of them plotting how to invalidate the prenup. The courtroom was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. With each new video, Jane sank lower in her chair. Matt went from confident to horrified. The judge, who at first had a neutral expression, now looked disgusted, which was an excellent sign. When the evidence presentation was over, Jane was hyperventilating and Matt looked like he was about to throw up. The judge turned to Matt. Do you have any response to this evidence? And here's where it got even better. Matt closed his briefcase and told the court that his client would be withdrawing her financial claims. Just like that, Jane turned to him, horrified, but he didn't even look at her. And, oh, the tragedy. Nothing stings quite like your boyfriend dumping you in the middle of a courtroom. Godspeed on your recovery, Jane. She tried to speak up, saying they could still invalidate the prenup, but Matt cut her off. With the evidence presented, he knew he had no chance. The judge had seen enough, and she clearly had no sympathy for Jane's case. So, the ruling was swift and brutal. All financial claims dismissed, prenuptial agreement valid, divorce granted on grounds of adultery. Jane would leave with only what the prenup specified. Basically, her personal belongings and a small settlement that wouldn't even cover a year of her shopping habit. When the gavel dropped, Jane just sat there, stunned, like she couldn't process what had just happened. Months of planning, scheming, and cheating, and in less than an hour it was all over. She didn't get my business, my house, or the alimony she'd taken for granted. Nothing, as Thanos would say. All that for a drop of blood? Except, in Jane's case, she didn't even get that. I walked out of the courtroom like a boss. Jane tried to catch up to me in the hallway, mascara running down her face, wanting to explain everything. I just kept walking. There was nothing left to say. The aftermath was pretty straightforward. Jane had 2 weeks to get her stuff out of the house. She tried calling me a few times, alternating between crying, apologizing, and threatening me. I blocked her after the first day. When I came to collect her belongings, I made sure to have a couple of friends as witnesses. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in days. A part of me almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered her entire plot to take everything from me, and any flicker of sympathy vanished. I spent years of my life with that woman. I gave her everything. I made sure she was comfortable. I took care of her. I loved her. I showered her with gifts, everything a good husband would do. But the moment she decided to disrespect me, to disrespect my hard work, she was dead to me. She took her clothes, her jewelry, and her personal items. She left with 5 suitcases and a couple of boxes. A stark contrast to the millions she thought she'd be getting. The funniest part, she'd already put down a deposit on a luxury condo, assuming she'd be flush with cash after the divorce. Lost that deposit, of course. She'd also racked up a massive amount of debt on her credit cards, shopping for her new life, and all of that, legally, was her responsibility. And Matt, turns out his law firm wasn't too happy when they discovered he'd been helping a client plan to defraud her husband. Oh, and sleeping with her, too. Chris made sure to send the evidence to the State Bar Association, and last I heard, Matt was facing an ethics investigation. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. The whole experience changed me. I'm not going to lie. I'm more cautious now, more guarded with who I trust. But my business is doing better than ever. After the divorce was finalized, I poured myself into my work. I secured some major contracts, expanded the company into commercial development, sold the house, couldn't stand living there with all those memories, and bought a smaller place, closer to my main office. It's not as fancy, but it's mine. A few friends tried to set me up on dates. I went out a couple of times a few months later, but wasn't interested. Trust isn't something I give away easily anymore. Maybe someday, but for now, I'm good focusing on myself and my business. Actually, I'm more than good. Oh, and I got a dog. I named him Pickle. He wasn't a planned addition to my life. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, I was at a construction site, checking the foundation, when this bizarre little stray wandered onto the property. He was this weird greenish-brown color, probably from rolling around in who knows what, and skinny as hell. One of my workers was about to shoo him away when I told him I'd handle it. I gave him some of my lunch, and this little dude just sat there, looking at me like I'd handed him the keys to heaven. He didn't have a collar or a microchip. When I took him to the vet later, he was still covered in these weird stains that looked like pickle juice, hence the name. Turned out to be some kind of algae from the creek behind the construction site. Eventually, the stains faded, but the name stuck. The vet estimated he was about 2 years old, a terrier mix, and, possibly, Chihuahua, and who knows what else. I had no intention of keeping him. I told myself I was just cleaning him up so he'd have a better chance at the shelter. But that first night, he climbed up on the couch next to me, let out a dramatic sigh like he'd had the hardest day in the world, and fell asleep on my leg. And, well, that was it for me. Now, Pickle sleeps in my bed. Jane would have lost her mind over that. She was always talking about boundaries with dogs. Pickle comes to work with me almost every day, riding shotgun with his head out the window like he owns the road. The clients love him, especially since he has a weird talent for finding lost tools on the job sites. Seriously, this little dude has saved us hours searching for dropped screws and misplaced tape measures. The best thing about Pickle, though, is that he doesn't have the slightest interest in my bank account. After years of trying to keep up with Jane, there's something incredibly refreshing about a relationship where success is measured in belly rubs and tennis balls. Jane tried to contact me 3 months after everything, sending me a long email about how she'd changed and realized what she'd lost. I didn't reply. There are some things that can't be fixed and some bridges that need to stay burned. It's been about 6 months since the divorce was finalized. I occasionally hear about Jane through mutual friends. She moved back in with her parents for a while and got a job at a boutique. A far cry from the lavish, rich divorcee lifestyle she thought she'd have. As for me, life goes on. I'm considering taking a vacation for the first time in years, somewhere with beaches and no cell service. Reddit update. It's been a while, and a few of you asked for an update, so here it is. It's been a year and a half since the divorce. First, my business has grown like crazy since all this went down. It's like, once I stopped having Jane draining my bank account and my mental energy, I could really focus on what matters. We've expanded into 3 new counties and even opened a second office. I've got almost 40 employees now, and we're completely booked with projects for the next year and a half. But the revenge part of this story isn't over yet. Remember I mentioned that my lawyer, Chris, sent evidence to the Bar Association about Matt's ethics? Well, turns out helping your girlfriend plan to defraud her husband while sleeping with her doesn't make a good impression on the bar. After a lengthy investigation, Matt had his license suspended for 18 months. I have no idea how he's paying his bills now, but that's not my problem. As for Jane, I've heard things through the grapevine. After moving back in with her parents, She apparently tried to reinvent herself as some kind of social media influencer. Started an Instagram account to promote boutiques and local businesses. Last I checked, she had about 2,000 followers and was desperate to get free stuff in exchange for exposure. Pretty sad for someone who used to drop thousands on shopping sprees without a second thought. One of the most satisfying developments came through a mutual friend. He told me that Jane and Matt tried to get back together after the legal drama died down. They moved into a crummy apartment together, but it only lasted about 3 months before they had a massive falling out. Turns out, without my money involved, their perfect relationship wasn't so perfect after all. Matt, shocker, note the sarcasm, cheated on her. And with whom? A paralegal from his old firm. Pure poetry. Last month, I finally took that beach vacation I mentioned in my last post. Went to Hawaii for 2 weeks. Left my laptop at home and only checked my work emails twice. The result, my business didn't collapse, the world didn't end, and I remembered what it's like to actually relax. Life isn't perfect now, but it's good. I work hard, I'm surrounded by people I trust, and I'm building something meaningful, both in my business and my personal life. And, at the end of the day, that's worth more than any amount of money Jane tried to take from me. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.